Nobody remembered whose idea it was to bring children to the screening. Later, when every news channel on the Galactic Network was replaying what happened, dozens of officials would claim they had objected from the start. But the truth was simpler. Nobody thought it would matter. Scholar Finnick had spent 2 years organizing the event. He called it Predators and Prey, the Ecosystem Archives, and he was proud of it. The Dreth historian had collected footage from 41 homeworlds, carefully edited and narrated, showing the apex predators that shaped each planet's evolutionary history. It was supposed to be educational. It was supposed to bring species closer together through understanding. The grand viewing hall on the Galactic Forum Station could seat 3,000 beings of various sizes. That evening, roughly 800 had shown up. Diplomats, scientists, cultural attachés, and a handful of families who thought it might be fun. The seats were adjustable, built to accommodate everything from the massive armored Scathi to the tiny, soft-bodied Pelori. Rhea Bunsel sat in the fourth row, her legs swinging because the seat was too big for her. She was 9 years old, brown-skinned, with dark hair pulled into 2 braids, and she was eating dried mango slices from a plastic bag her father had packed. She had been living on the station for almost 2 years now, ever since her father Darrow had been appointed as Earth's cultural liaison to the Galactic Forum. Rhea loved the station. She loved the way the corridors curved upward if you looked far enough. She loved the marketplace where a dozen species sold things she could not name. She loved the observation deck where you could watch the gas giant below swirl in slow, enormous storms. Most of all, she loved meeting new aliens because to Rhea, none of them were alien at all. They were just people who looked different. Her father sat beside her, tall and calm, his diplomat smile already in place. Darrow Bunsel was good at his job because he listened more than he talked, and because he never pretended humans were something they were not. "Papa, what is that one?" Rhea whispered, pointing at a group of beings settling in his seats across the aisle. They were small, barely taller than Rhea herself, with smooth blue-green skin and enormous golden eyes that seemed to take up half their faces. They moved in a tight cluster, as if afraid to be separated. "Those are the Pelori," Darrow whispered back. "Very gentle people. They come from a water world with low gravity. Be polite if you meet one." "They look scared already," Rhea said. Darrow glanced over. She was right. The Pelori delegation, led by an elder called Counselor Moth, had tucked themselves into the far corner of the hall. Among them was a child, roughly Rhea's age, with the same golden eyes but smaller and rounder. The child was pressed tight against Moth's side, his small webbed fingers gripping her arm. "That is because they evolved as prey animals," Darrow said quietly. On their world, almost everything bigger than them was a predator. Fear is very deep in their biology. Rhea frowned at this, but said nothing. She put another mango slice in her mouth and turned back to the screen. The lights dimmed. Scholar Finnick walked to the front of the hall, his translucent wings folded neatly behind him, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of the projection system. He spoke in the common galactic language, his voice amplified through the hall. "Welcome, honored delegates and guests. Tonight, we seek understanding. Every species in this room evolved on a world shaped by predators. Some of us descend from the hunters, some from the hunted. But all of us carry the memory of those forces in our biology, our culture, and our fears. Tonight, we watch together. We learn together." Polite applause rippled through the hall. Finnick stepped aside, and the first footage began. It started gently. Predators from low-danger worlds. A slow-moving ambush feeder from a fungal planet. A burrowing creature that trapped small insects in sticky webs. The footage was interesting in an academic way, and the audience responded with calm murmurs and quiet note-taking. Rhea watched everything with wide eyes. She leaned over to her father every few minutes to ask questions. "How does it see underground? And does it hurt the little ones? And could we keep one as a pet?" Darrow answered each question patiently, smiling at her curiosity. Across the hall, the Pelori were less comfortable. Even the mild footage made the young child press closer to Counselor Moth. The elder stroked his head softly, whispering reassurances. She had brought him here on purpose, hoping the structured, educational setting might help him manage the fears that every Pelori carried from birth. Their species had spent millennia fleeing from everything. Mob believed it was time to stop running, at least from images on a screen. Fennec watched from the side, quietly satisfied. The first segments had gone well. The audience was engaged, the footage was clear, and no one had left. Then he glanced at his schedule and felt a small knot form in his stomach. The segments were ordered by danger classification. They had just finished Class 3. The next batch would jump to Class 7 and above. And, at the very end, save for last because humans were the newest forum members, was Earth. Class 12. Death World. Fennec had reviewed that footage 7 times. Each time, it made his wings twitch involuntarily. He stepped back to the podium and kept his voice steady. We will now proceed to the higher classification segments. Please be advised that the following footage depicts apex predators from worlds rated Class 7 and above. The lights dimmed further. Somewhere in the far corner, a small Pelori child whimpered. And in the fourth row, Rhea Bunsel reached into her bag for another mango slice. The first Class 7 predator to appear on screen was a rock lizard from the heavy gravity world of Barayan. It was 6 meters long, covered in natural armor plating, and it hunted by charging at full speed and smashing through whatever stood in its path. The footage showed it breaking through a stone wall to reach a nesting burrow. The sound of impact echoed through the grand viewing hall speakers, and 40 different species flinched at the same time. Rhea leaned forward in her seat. "That is so cool," she whispered. Her father put a hand on her shoulder. "Sit back, Rhea." She sat back, but her eyes never left the screen. The next segment showed a pack of aerial hunters from a gas giant's floating ecosystem. They were long, ribbon-like creatures with translucent bodies, and they hunted by surrounding their prey in midair and constricting. The footage captured a hunt in real time, 6 of them wrapping around a creature 3 times their combined size, pulling it apart in silence. There was no roaring, no drama, just quiet, efficient death. A delegation of Minari, small feathered beings who could glide short distances, stood up and walked out. They did not say anything. They simply left. 2 other species followed within the next few minutes. Fennec noticed and made note. Acceptable losses, he told himself. The screening was voluntary. No one was forced to stay. But then the Skathi footage played. Captain Alya, the station's head of security, was Skathi herself, and she watched the segment with professional interest. Her species was large, armored, crustacean in build, and they were apex predators on their own world. The footage showed a Skathi hunting crab running down a sand-burrowing mammal across an open beach. It caught the mammal, held it in one massive claw, and crushed it without slowing down. Alya watched without expression. To her, it was simply nature, but from the Pelori corner came a sound that made half the hall turn around. It was Grin, the young Pelori child, and he was crying. Not soft crying, a high, thin keening that seemed to vibrate in the bones. It was a prey animal's distress call, millions of years old, built into Pelori biology long before they ever developed language. Counselor Moth wrapped both arms around Grin and pulled him close. She was shaking too, her golden eyes wide and wet, but she held herself together for the child's sake. She whispered to him in Pelori, soft and fast, telling him it was only pictures, only light on a screen, nothing could reach them here. Grin did not stop crying. Fennec watched this from the side of the hall and felt guilt settle into his chest. He should have set a maximum classification. He should have put warnings on the invitation. He should have thought about the Pelori. During the brief intermission that followed, Fennec walked quickly to where Ambassador Darrow was sitting. Rhea had gone to the restroom with the station attendant, so they could speak freely. "Ambassador, I need to discuss the Earth segment," Fennec said, keeping his voice low. His wings fluttered with anxiety. Darrow looked at him calmly. "Go ahead. I have reviewed the footage. It includes wolves, large cats, sharks, saltwater crocodilians, and birds of prey. Earth is classified as a death world, Class 12. That is the highest classification of any forum member's homeworld." Fennec paused. "I'm asking whether you would prefer we remove it from tonight's screening." Darrow was quiet for a moment. He looked across the hall at the Pelori delegation. Grin had stopped keening, but was still curled into a tight ball against Maud's body. His golden eyes were squeezed shut. If you remove it, Darrow said slowly, the other species will wonder why. They will fill the gap with their own fears, and those fears will be worse than anything on that screen. Fennec's compound eyes shifted. And if we show it, then they will see the truth about our world. That is what this event is for, is it not? Fennec nodded, though his wings had not stopped trembling. There is one more thing. The final clip in the Earth segment. It shows a human interacting with a large predator. I included it for context. I hope it helps. Darrow raised an eyebrow, but did not ask for details. Rhea returned from the restroom and climbed back into her seat. She looked across the hall at the Pelori group, and her face changed. The fun had drained out of the evening for her. She could see the small alien child shaking, and something in her chest tightened. Papa, she said quietly, that little one is really, really scared. I know, Darrow said. Can I go talk to him? Not right now, Rhea. The next segment is about to start. Rhea nodded, but she did not look at the screen. She kept watching Grin. The intermission ended. Fennec returned to the podium. He took a breath that made his wings vibrate and spoke the words that would make this evening famous across the galaxy. Final segment. Planet, Earth. Classification, Death World, Class 12. Please be advised. This footage contains apex predators from one of the most hostile biospheres ever documented by the Galactic Forum. The hall went so quiet that Rhea could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. The screen flickered to life with an image of a blue and green planet hanging in black space. Beautiful and impossible and full of things that could kill you in 100 different ways. Rhea looked at her homeworld on the screen and smiled. Across the hall, Grin opened his eyes just enough to see the blue planet, and his whole body began to shake. The wolves came first. The footage opened on a frozen landscape, white and gray stretching to the horizon under a pale sky. Then the camera found them. 7 wolves moving across the snow in a loose formation, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. They were not running yet. They were walking with a patience that somehow felt worse than speed. The narration, provided by Fennec's own recorded voice, explained that these were Earth's pack hunters, endurance predators. They did not need to be the fastest or the strongest. They simply never stopped. The footage showed the chase. A large herbivore, something the narration called an elk, broke into a run. The wolves followed. They did not sprint. They jogged. The elk ran faster, pulling ahead, and for a moment it looked like it would escape. But the wolves kept coming. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. The elk began to slow. The wolves did not. When the pack finally brought it down, the grand viewing hall was completely silent. Not the comfortable silence of attention, but the heavy silence of beings who had just understood something terrible about the universe. A Korvathi delegate, an 8-legged species from a desert world, turned to the being beside him and said in a voice loud enough to carry, "They run their prey to exhaustion." That is not hunting. That is horror. Nobody disagreed. The footage cut to Africa. The savanna was golden and wide, and for a brief moment the beauty of it seemed to calm the room. Then a lioness appeared in the tall grass, her body low, her eyes fixed on a herd of wildebeest in the distance. She was perfectly still. The narration explained that these were ambush predators, evolved to deliver explosive speed over short distances. The lioness charged. The burst of acceleration made several delegates physically recoil. She crossed the distance in seconds, hit a wildebeest at full speed, and dragged it down with claws and teeth. The kill was fast but violent, and Fennec's narration did nothing to soften it. A Grellian ambassador, whose species resembled Earth's deer in body shape, stood up so abruptly that his chair slid backward. He said nothing. He just walked out, his hooves clicking on the floor in rapid, panicked steps. Then the ocean. Most galactic species had oceans on their homeworlds, but few had anything like what appeared on screen next. A great white shark, 5 meters of gray muscle and teeth, cruised through dark blue water. The camera was below it, looking up, and the silhouette against the surface light made it look like a living shadow. The footage showed the shark hunting a seal. It came from below, rising through the water at terrifying speed, and breached the surface completely. For one frozen moment, the entire animal was in the air, a seal clamped in its jaws, water cascading off its body. Then it crashed back into the ocean and was gone. Grin screamed. It was not the keening from before. This was a full, raw scream of terror that cut through the hall like a blade. Counselor Moth pulled him into her lap and covered his eyes, but the damage was done. Other Pelori were crying now, too. One had fallen out of his seat and was curled on the floor. Captain Alya took 3 steps toward the projection controls. Her armored hand was reaching for the emergency shutoff. The footage changed again. A golden eagle, wings tucked, diving from a mountain peak. The narration said it was reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. The camera tracked down, 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 until it struck a mountain goat on a narrow ledge and sent the animal tumbling off the cliff. The eagle followed it down, riding the fall like it was nothing. Then the crocodile. A saltwater crocodile, 6 meters long, lying motionless in brown water. It looked like a log. It looked like nothing. Then a large animal stepped to the water's edge to drink, and the crocodile exploded from the surface. It seized the animal by the face and rolled. The death roll. The water churned red and brown. 3 more delegations got up and left. A Tresk diplomat was openly yelling at Fennec from across the hall, demanding the footage be stopped. The Korvathi delegation had moved to the exits, but stood watching, unable to look away. Captain Alya's hand was on the shutoff switch. She looked at Fennec for the order. Then the screen changed one more time. The violence stopped. The music faded. The footage showed a wide grassland at sunset, golden light falling over tall green grass. And sitting in that grass, alone, was a human woman. She was small compared to everything that had come before. No clothes, no fangs, no armor. She wore simple clothes and sat cross-legged, writing something in a notebook. Behind her, moving through the grass with slow, heavy steps, a male lion approached. Full-grown, his mane was dark, his body massive, and his eyes were locked on the human. Every being in the grand viewing hall held their breath. 800 hearts, of various shapes and chemistries, beat faster at the same time. This was it. This was where the human died. The woman heard the lion. She turned her head slowly. She looked at it. She did not run. She did not scream. She spoke, softly, words a microphone barely caught, and she held out one hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. The lion stopped. It looked at her hand. Then it lay down beside her, close enough that its mane brushed her arm. The woman rested her hand on the lion's head, and together they sat in the golden grass as the sun went down. The screen went dark. The hall was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Rial looked at the black screen and then looked at her father. Daro's face was still, but his eyes were shining. Then Rial looked across the hall at Grin, and her decision was made. The lights came up halfway, and the grand viewing hall broke apart. Not physically. The walls held, the ceiling stayed where it was, and the seats remained bolted to the floor. But the order of the room, the careful arrangement of species and diplomacy and polite distance, crumbled in an instant. 3 delegations were already at the doors, pushing past each other in their rush to leave. A Tresk diplomat was shouting at Scholar Fennec near the podium, his scaled face flushed dark with anger. 2 Korvathi were arguing loudly with a Skathi guard about whether the screening constituted a threat display under forum law. A Grelian cultural aide was crying quietly into her communicator, trying to reach her ship. And in the far corner of the hall, a small Pelori child named Grin had stopped moving entirely. He was not crying anymore. He was not keening or screaming. He had gone somewhere inside himself where sound could not follow. His small body was rigid, locked tight, his webbed fingers curled into fists against his chest. His golden eyes were squeezed shut so hard that the skin around them had gone pale. Counselor Moth was holding him, speaking to him, stroking his smooth head, but Grin was beyond hearing. Moth looked up at the other Pelori delegates. Her face said what her voice could not. She did not know how to bring him back. From the 4th row, Riab Bunsel watched all of this. She watched the delegates arguing. She watched Fennec trying to calm the Tresk diplomat. She watched the chaos and the fear and the anger filling the room like smoke. And then she looked at Grin again, and something in her settled into a decision that was older than language. She turned to her father. Papa, I am going over there. It was not a question. Darrow looked at his daughter. He saw the set of her jaw and the steadiness in her eyes, and he recognized it because he had seen it in the mirror 1,000 times. It was the look a Bunsel got when they had made up their mind. Ria, he said carefully, the Pelori are very frightened right now. Of the footage, of this room, and of us. I know, Ria said. That is why I need to go. Darrow held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Ria slid off her seat. She picked up her bag of dried mango slices, held it against her chest, and began walking across the hall. Captain Alya saw her immediately. The Skathi security chief was standing near the center aisle, her armored body positioned to intervene in any direction. When she saw a small human child walking toward the most traumatized group in the room, every instinct she had said stop her. She took a step forward. Then she caught movement in her peripheral vision. Ambassador Darrow had raised one hand, palm out, fingers spread. Wait. The human gesture was simple, and Alya understood it. She stopped, but her hand rested on the stun baton at her hip. Ria crossed the hall. She walked past arguing delegates who did not notice her. She walked past overturned chairs and scattered data pads. She walked with the calm, unhurried steps of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The Pelori delegation saw her coming. 2 adult Pelori stepped back, their instincts screaming at them to flee from the approaching predator species. One of them made a soft hissing sound, a warning. But Ria was small, and she was slow, and she kept her hands visible, and something about the way she moved made the Pelori hesitate instead of run. Counselor Moth looked up and saw the human child standing 3 steps away. Her golden eyes went wide. She pulled Grin tighter against her body, a mother's reflex that crossed every species boundary in the galaxy. Ria stopped. She did not step closer. She did not reach out. She knelt down, slowly, until she was sitting on the floor at Grin's eye level. Then she placed her bag of mango slices on the ground beside her and rested her hands in her lap. Hello, she said. Her voice was quiet and steady, the way her father spoke when things were most serious. My name is Ria. I am from Earth. Maud stared at her. The elder's body was trembling, caught between the instinct to protect Grin and the realization that this small creature was not attacking. I saw the footage too, Ria continued, speaking to Grin even though his eyes were shut. The wolves and the lions and the sharks and all of it. I saw it, and I know it was scary. She paused. Grin did not move. Those animals are real, Ria said. They live on my planet. I am not going to pretend they do not exist, because that would be lying, and my papa says lying to someone who is scared only makes the fear worse later. Maud blinked. She had not expected honesty. Every other species would have minimized, reassured, deflected. This child was doing none of those things. But here's what the footage did not show, Ria said. She shifted slightly, sitting cross-legged now, comfortable on the hard floor. On Earth, we have birds called crows. They are smart. They remember faces. And my grandmother, she feeds the crows near her house every single morning. She has been doing it for 12 years. And every morning, the crows bring her gifts. Small shiny things. Buttons. Bits of glass. One time a coin. Because they trust her. Ria's voice was not dramatic. She was not performing. She was just talking the way a child talks when she is telling someone something important. We have dogs, she said. Dogs came from wolves. The same wolves you just saw on the screen. But thousands of years ago, some wolves sat by our fires, and we fed them, and they stayed. And now they sleep in our beds, and lick our faces and guard our babies. Grin's body was still rigid, but his breathing had changed. It was slowing just slightly. My neighbor has a dog named Biscuit, Ria said. Biscuit weighs 40 kilograms and has teeth that could break a bone. But when my neighbor's baby was born, Biscuit slept under the crib every single night for a year. Not because anyone told him to, because he decided the baby was his to protect. Grin's fingers uncurled just a little. Ria waited. She did not push. She sat on the cold floor of a space station 1,000 light years from home, and she waited for a frightened child she had never met to decide whether a human was something to fear. Slowly, so slowly that Moth almost missed it. Grin opened his eyes. He saw a girl, small like him. No clothes, no fangs, no armor. Just dark eyes and two braids and a calm, patient face. Riyah smiled at him. Not a big smile. Just enough to say, I am here. I'm not going anywhere. The arguments stopped first. Not because anyone resolved them, but because one by one, the delegates noticed what was happening in the far corner of the grand viewing hall. A human child was sitting on the floor in front of the Pelori delegation. She was cross-legged, relaxed, with a small plastic bag beside her. The most terrified child in the room was looking at her with eyes that were still wet, but no longer shut. The Tresk diplomat stopped mid-sentence. The Korvathi stopped pacing. Even Captain Alya, who had been ready to stun anything that moved wrong, lowered her hand from her weapon and stood still. 800 beings watched. Riyah did not know she had an audience. Her entire world had narrowed to the small blue-green child in front of her and the slow, careful work of building a bridge out of nothing but words and patience. She reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of dried mango. She held it on her open palm, flat, fingers loose, exactly the way her grandmother had taught her to feed a nervous horse at a farm outside their city when Riyah was 6 years old. Slow, gentle, no sudden movements. This is from my planet, she said. It is a fruit called mango. It is sweet. Would you like to try it? Grin stared at the small, orange piece on her palm. His golden eyes were enormous in his small face. Behind him, Counselor Moth watched with a stillness that went beyond fear into something closer to awe. Grin's hand moved. It was shaking badly, the webbed fingers trembling as if the air itself was too heavy for them. He reached out, touched the mango slice with the tip of one finger, and pulled back. Then he reached again, picked it up between two fingers, and brought it to his mouth. He tasted it. His eyes blinked twice, rapidly. Then he ate it. Riyah smiled. She pulled out another piece, put it in her own mouth, and chewed. See? Safe. We eat the same things. We share. She held out another piece. Grin took it faster this time. His hand was still shaking, but less. On Earth, Riyah said, chewing her own piece, we have animals called elephants. They are the biggest land animals on our planet. Really, really big. Bigger than most things in this room. And when one of them dies, the others stand around the body for days. They touch it with their trunks. They make sounds. Some scientists think they're saying goodbye. Grin was listening. His rigid body had softened. He was still pressed against Moth, but he was no longer curled into a ball. He was sitting up, just barely, leaning forward toward the girl on the floor. We have dolphins too, Riyah said. They live in the ocean, like the shark you saw, but dolphins are different. When a human falls into the water and cannot swim, dolphins will push them back to the shore. They do not have to. Nobody asks them. They just do it. Grin's breathing was steady now. The keening had stopped completely. He was watching Riyah with the focused attention of a child who has found something more interesting than his fear. And cats, Riyah said, and she laughed a little. Cats are so funny. They act like they do not care about anything. They knock things off tables and ignore you when you call their name. But there was a cat in my country who woke up her whole family when their house was on fire. She bit their fingers and screamed until they got out. She saved 5 people because she refused to let them sleep through danger. Something extraordinary happened then. Grin leaned forward, away from Moth, and toward Riyah. It was a small movement, barely a hand's width, but in that room, watched by hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds, it was the loudest thing that had happened all evening. Then Grin leaned against Riyah's side. A human child from a death world. A prey species child from a water world. Sitting together on a cold metal floor, sharing dried fruit. Counselor Moth let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like her entire life. Tears formed in her golden eyes and ran down her smooth face. She looked up and found Ambassador Darrow standing 10 meters away, his hands clasped behind his back, his own eyes shining. He did not approach. He did not need to. Scholar Finnick had his personal recorder running. His compound eyes were fixed on the 2 children. His wings were still for the first time all evening. He was watching something that no research paper, no documentary, no archive could ever contain. He was watching a Death World predator species prove, through a 9-year-old girl, that the most dangerous thing about humans was not their world or their strength or their persistence. It was their kindness. And that was more terrifying and more beautiful than anything he had ever documented. Captain Alya uncrossed her arms. She turned to her security team and made a single gesture. Stand down. Completely. Then she turned back to watch. Later, in a bar on the station's lower ring, she would tell a fellow officer that it was the most dangerous thing she had ever seen a human do. Walking unarmed into a cluster of terrified prey animals, any of whom could have bolted and hurt themselves or others in panic. And the bravest, because the girl had known the risk and gone anyway. The delegates who had been arguing sat back down. The ones who had been heading for the door stopped and turned around. The fear that had filled the hall like poison was still there, but it was changing. It was becoming something else, something that did not have a name in most galactic languages. In the quiet, Grin whispered his first words. His voice was thin and small, barely louder than breathing. Are all humans like you? Ria thought about this. She thought about it seriously, the way children do when they know a question matters. The good ones try to be, she said. Grin nodded slowly, as if this was the most important thing anyone had ever told him. Then he reached into Ria's bag, took another piece of mango, and offered it back to her. She took it. They ate together in the silence of a room that was learning for the first time what it really meant to come from Earth. 3 days after the screening, Scholar Finnick sat alone in his quarters and stared at a blank page. He had written over 200 academic papers in his career. Detailed, precise, carefully structured studies of biology, ecology, and species behavior. He knew how to build an argument from data. He knew how to keep emotion out of analysis. He could not do it this time. So he did something he had never done before. He wrote a personal essay. He titled it The Death World Child Who Tamed a Room, and he wrote it in one sitting, without stopping, without editing, without caring whether it met academic standards. He wrote about how 800 beings from 41 worlds had watched footage of Earth predators and felt a fear so deep it seemed to touch something ancient in every species present. He wrote about how the hall had descended into chaos, how delegations had fled, how a small Pelori child had gone rigid with terror. And then he wrote about a girl named Ria who walked across that hall with a bag of dried fruit and sat down on the floor. Finnick published the essay on the Galactic Academic Network the next morning. By midday, it had been shared beyond the academic channels into the general population networks. By evening, it had been translated into 70 languages. By the end of the week, it existed in over 300. The essay's final line spread faster than the rest. It appeared on message boards, in diplomatic briefs, in school curricula across a dozen worlds. Finnick had written, "We spent centuries cataloging Earth's predators. We should have been studying its children." The reaction was enormous and immediate. Counselor Moth, who had spent 3 days barely sleeping, submitted a formal proposal to the Galactic Forum Council. She stood before the assembled representatives, her small body straight, her golden eyes clear, and she spoke in a voice that did not shake. She said that the classification Death World was not wrong, but it was incomplete. Earth was indeed one of the most dangerous planets ever documented. Its predators were fast, strong, relentless, and diverse. Its environment was hostile in ways that most species could barely imagine. All this was true. But the species that had risen to dominance on that planet had done something no classification system could account for. They had taken the wolves that hunted them and turned them into companions. They had studied the predators that killed them and learned not just how to survive, but how to coexist. And when faced with a frightened child from another world, their first instinct was not to dominate or ignore, but to sit down and share food. Mav proposed a new designation, Guardian World. A planet whose dominant species possessed the full capacity for extreme violence, but chose, as its default, protection. The proposal sparked the biggest debate the Forum had seen in a decade. Some species objected. The Tress delegation argued that one child's actions could not represent an entire species. The Korvathi demanded more data. Several worlds pointed to human history, to wars and destruction and cruelty, and asked how any species with that record could be called guardians. But for the first time in the forum's history, the debate was not about whether humans were dangerous. That question had been answered by the footage. Everyone knew what Earth produced. The debate was about what it meant that a species that dangerous could also produce a child that gentle. And that was a question nobody had an easy answer for. While the politicians argued, life on the station continued. Grin began visiting the human quarters. At first, he came with Moth, who watched from the doorway with nervous eyes. Then he came with just one adult escort. Then, after 2 weeks, he came alone. Ria taught him to play card games. She taught him a clapping game her mother had taught her before she passed away. She showed him pictures of Earth, not the predators but the other things. Sunsets over the ocean. Fields of flowers that stretched to the horizon. A baby elephant learning to walk while its mother waited patiently beside it. Grin taught Ria Pelori songs. They were strange and beautiful, full of sounds that human vocal cords could not quite produce. But Ria tried anyway, and her terrible attempts made Grin laugh. It was the first time anyone on the station had heard a Pelori child laugh in the presence of a human. Their friendship became a quiet symbol, not because anyone planned it, but because it was real in a place where most things were political. Ambassador Darrow watched all of this from a respectful distance. He was proud of his daughter in a way that went deeper than words. But he also understood something that the essays and proposals and debates missed. Ria had not done anything extraordinary. She had done something ordinary. She had seen a scared child and gone to help. On Earth, that was not heroism. That was Tuesday. But out here, among species that had spent their entire evolutionary history running from things with teeth, the simple act of a predator choosing gentleness was the most radical thing they had ever witnessed. One evening, a month after the screening, Ria and Grin sat together on the observation deck. The gas giant below them swirled in slow bands of orange and cream, filling the viewport with quiet color. They had finished their card game and were sitting in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes between people who do not need to fill every moment with sound. Grin looked at Ria. His golden eyes were calm, a thing that would have been impossible a month ago in the presence of a human. "Ria," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you ever afraid?" Ria looked at the gas giant. She thought about it the way she always thought about important questions, slowly and honestly. "All the time," she said. Grin tilted his head. "But you do not act afraid. When you came to me in the hall, you were not afraid at all." "No, I was afraid," Ria said. "I was afraid you would not want me there. I was afraid I would make it worse. I was afraid everyone was watching and I would do something stupid." "Then why did you come?" Ria turned to look at him. She was 9 years old, from a planet full of wolves and lions and sharks and crocodiles, and she had never in her short life let fear stop her from doing something that mattered. "Because you needed me to be brave," she said simply. "So I was." Grin looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned against her side, the way he had done in the hall, and together they watched the storm clouds move across the face of the giant below. Somewhere on the station, Scholar Finnick was already writing his next paper. Somewhere, Counselor Moth was preparing her second address to the forum. Somewhere, Captain Alya was telling the story again to a group of young officers who had not been there. But here, on the observation deck, there were just 2 children sitting together in the quiet. One from a world of predators, one from a world of prey, and between them, nothing but trust.